Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Gaffer in Gear. In today's episode we're looking at the Aputure MT, which is a 1 foot pixel tube with built-in battery and built-in CRMX. Alright, so I'm going to start this review off in a bit of a weird place. One of the things I think is a real positive with this. So when I heard that they were making a 1 foot tube with 36 pixels, I got very excited. And here's why. It's to do with pixel resolution. All right, so this might sound a bit odd. So you've got a 1 foot tube here, but it's got double the amount of pixels of a Titan tube. So why would I use that? Well, I would use something like this, a small tube, for lighting small product. And this is where that resolution comes in really handy. So let's just put a glass bottle up and pop the tube behind it, and the tube's running at 17%. So look, that's, I'll just make sure that's in focus. So that's pretty crazy. Now, can you imagine trying to do that and you only had a resolution of, say, 4 pixels? Okay, so that's where the high resolution comes in, really, really handy. Now, I don't think I'd be using, something as extreme as this. I'd probably be using something like a single pixel chase. So I'll just see if I can find my way through the menu. This is probably more the sort of thing I would use. I'd probably go the other way. That could come in really handy for, it's probably a bit over the top and a bit overexposed. So just to make the point about the resolution over a small area, I'm going to use a Titan tube which has 16 pixels, but over the entire length of the tube here, which is 1 meter. And as you'll see, we don't quite get the same effect when we go through the bottle. We don't have the resolution. So here we have them side by side, and you can see the difference the resolution makes when you're working on a small scale. All right, so just to give you more of an idea, I've got a glass here that I haven't cleaned or anything like that, just sitting on the Apple box. Put this just out of shot, and let's see what we get, just doing a single pixel chase. Okay, so that's the sort of situation which I would use something like this, just for product shots, just to get that sort of reveal happening. And the resolution's coming in handy here. The next pro for me is the price point. This thing sells for $200, and that's US dollars. And for your $200, you get a case, which is actually well built. You get the light, of course. You get a little floor stand. You get a USB-C cable for charging. You don't get a charger, but you've probably got hundreds of those. And you also get a little grid to put on the front to control your light. So a remarkable value. Now, the next pro after this for me, and the biggest pro of the whole unit, is it has my 4 favorite letters in it, CRMX. So that's Lumen Radio Control, or wireless DMX. So what that enables me to do is run this unit off my professional lighting desk that I've got here, or a professional lighting console. So I've wanted for so long a small tube like this that I can have complete DMX control over. Now, my favorite profile here is CCT HSI. So I can dial in 2000 Kelvin all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin. I can add a plus minus green to that. Then I can cross fade in a color hue. And if I desire, I can also put a flash pattern onto that. So that's a huge plus. Having a small tube that I can finally integrate with the rest of my lighting kit, regardless of brand, is massive. Now, Aputure have given me permission to let you know about something that's coming. In the next firmware update, you'll be able to use the USB port here to output and input hardwired DMX via this adapter. All right, so you're probably thinking, why would I want to take something that's a slim form like this and then hook these ugly cables up to it? Well, here's something to consider. This thing has a CRMX receiver in it. Okay, so it can receive CRMX commands. It also has, with this, a DMX out. and it has an internal battery. So this could be used as a battery-powered CRMX receiver to run your other lights that don't have a built-in receiver. Now, okay, it's a bit big and it's a bit chunky, and it doesn't have anything to indicate the signal strength of your transmitter, but at $200 US, it's a pretty cheap backup receiver option. All right, so let's continue through the pros and cons. The build quality is fantastic. You know, definitely worth more than $200 US. In terms of rigging points, you've got the bottom or the top, depending on how you've got it orientated. So it's at one end, and you've got the center on the bottom or the top, depending on how you've got it orientated. The menu system, very easy to navigate. You've got a nice big screen, so you know, big plus for that. And the controls are very simply laid out. Now let's get into the negatives. So the biggest overwhelming negative for me is the shape of the unit. So if you're using it, say, on a tabletop, you can have it that way, you can have it that way, but if you want it anywhere in between, it's a little bit of a hassle to rig. All right, so what's that I hear? It's all the Aputure fanboys saying that, well, look, they give you the floor stand to get around that. All right, so here's my issue with the floor stand. It's a fantastic little floor stand unit, very well built, and you know, worth 200 bucks by itself. But here's the thing. So we've got this nice, beautiful, slim light. Now we've got it on a massive stand. It completely defeats the purpose of having a slim profile light. That's just my opinion, but there are other lights I could use in place of this now for that sort of scenario. The next negative, possible negative, is the magnets. So I better back up. In terms of a Pro, it has magnets, which you've probably already noticed, but the position of the magnets could be a bit of a problem, particularly if you're using the little grid. Now, when you put the grid on, it covers over the magnets. Okay, so if you're putting it onto a what's that called, a horizontal, vertical surface, that's not too bad, but if you're hanging it, it's a little bit on the weak side. I'd be a little bit worried. But look, if you do put the elastic to the sides, it will stay on, and it will do its okay job. But of course, if someone goes to move it, they will separate the two. So a little bit of a design flaw there. Now, the next negative for me, it's a bit of a big one, is there's no rigging point on the back, so they couldn't do that because of the circuitry. So for me, having a rigging point on the side is a little bit of a negative if I'm using this with reflective products. I wouldn't like to have my C-stand or rigging point on the side. I'd like to have it tucked in behind, or have a small arm coming in from behind to hide reflections. Now, in terms of a solution for that, let's say in terms of getting some articulation, mounting it to something metallic, in my magnet kits, I keep little Manfrotto ball heads, so little tripod ball heads. And these enable me to have full articulation when I'm mounting small lights like this. So I can point that wherever I need to point it, and then lock the arm. So that's my workaround solution for you know, lack of rigging options on small lights. All right, so other pros and cons that I've missed. So the HSI mode in this. All right, so it's got what I'm going to call a super advanced HSI mode. So in an advanced HSI mode, you can adjust your color hue. So you can select from your 360-degree color wheel. You can then saturate that to a Kelvin that you can adjust. Okay, so you can adjust your white point and then add a color on top of that. That's an advanced color mode. Now, I'm going to call this a super advanced color mode because it's not limited to 360 colors on your color vector. It's got 3,600 colors because it has a decimal point between each. So you can be at the moment I'm at 240. I can go 240.1, 240.2, 240.3. So I can really fine tune that color if it's not quite on the vector that I want. Now here's the negative with this. Because it has 10 times the amount of color vectors, it takes 10 times longer to scroll through and select your color. So we're at blue at the moment. I'm going to scroll like crazy. Let's see how long it takes me to get to purple. So that took a while. I'm still on purples and pinks and I'm scrolling like crazy. So It has a huge plus, but it has an even bigger negative in my opinion. It just takes so long to operate. And that brings me to my next negative. When you're operating in modes such as, let's say, our basic CCT, and you're adjusting your color, your CCT color, the scroll wheel is very slow to operate. It does take a while to scroll through. All right, in terms of the last couple of pros and cons, it's got a very slim edge here. So if you wanted to butt the units up together to get a continuous light source, you're not going to have a huge gap. So that's a huge plus. But if you're running the lights off USB power, and you can run them continuously at 100% off USB power, of course, depending on the output power of your USB supply, the USB cable now gets in the way of the two lights butting together. All right, so that is a little bit of a possible negative. I don't know how they could have designed it better to get around that. Now, in terms of using this as a set piece, it is a very stylish unit. It would look pretty good on set, you know, as a practical prop. But here are a few little issues with it. Nothing you can't get around with a bit of black tape. But on this side, you've got the silver mounting point. And on this side, you've got the Aputure logo. It would have been good if they were both on the same side so that I could quickly just drop this into place and not have something indicating that it's a professional unit. Now, the last pro I'll go through is the free grid that comes with it. A lot of free grids that come with lights are usually absolute crap. But this thing's actually solid. It's not going to flex. It's not going to sag. It really is a good quality unit. And it actually works. All right, so let's get into operating the unit. It's got an on-off switch on the side. Now, when it fires up, it does fire up into the last mode that you had it set to. Now here, for example, we're in CCT, but if I want to change my mode, I press the menu button, and then I can use the little wheel to scroll down to whatever it is I want to select. Let's go back to CCT mode. Now to select CCT mode, I press the wheel down. Now I've got three options here: intensity, CCT, and plus minus green. Now if I want to change something, I just make sure that that's in the box, press the button, the box now becomes highlighted, and I can make my adjustments. Very, very simple to operate. Okay, now I can go back to the menu system here by pressing the return button or the menu button. Let's go to the HSI mode, hue, saturation, intensity, and select that. So I press down the roller. Now I can select my intensity, I can select my hue, and as I said earlier in the video, you've got a decimal place, so you've got a lot of color tuning here. Now I can also adjust my saturation, which is how much mixture of color I've got to white light, and I can also adjust my Kelvin, so I can set the base CCT at which the light desaturates to. The next mode of operation is RGB, so that's pretty straightforward. I can select my intensity, my red, green, and blue channel intensity separately. Next is effects. If you click on that, you get system effects, which is the standard Aputure effects that are across their entire range. And you get a choice of pixel effects. So let's select pixel effect. Now we've got quite a few to choose from. We've got color fade, color circle, 1 pixel, 2 pixel chase, 3 pixel chase, rainbow, and pixel fire. Let's select a single pixel chase. So in this mode, I've got a pixel that is shifting across the screen. I can adjust the brightness of that pixel that's shifting across the screen. I can adjust my background intensity, so at the moment it's just set to black. I can adjust whether that pixel is small, medium, or large. I can select if it's going in one way or two ways. So let's change that to 2 ways. I can select what color those separate pixels are. So pixel 1 is set to a CCT. Pixel 2 is set to a color hue. So let's change Pixel 2. So I can select a color hue, and I don't have a huge range. And I can select a CCT. So now I've got 2 pixels working in a CCT. Now here's something I really like. The speed adjustment. It is measured in distance over time. So at the moment it is set to 12 centimeters a second. Now I totally understand what that means, whereas other tube lights, I can't figure out how to set the speeds. Now let's say I want to go back. Well, I've got a choice of going back to the main menu or hit the return button and go back to the previous sub-menu, which had all my effects in it. All right, let's go back to the main menu. Okay, let's go down now. We've got custom effects, so that's stuff you can program over the phone app. We've got our DMX settings. Let's go into there. Now you've got your DMX address. Now if you want to run this over DMX, it will not respond to DMX unless you are in this address menu. You've got a huge selection of DMX profiles. Now, I've currently got CCT HSI selected. That's got the little box colored in. So the box that is fully colored or solid box is what your current option is. We've got CCT RGB, CCT, CCT HSI, RGB. I'm going to stop talking because there's lots of them in here. All right, let's go back. We can set our DMX behavior, so a loss of behavior. So we can hold the last setting, which is my personal favorite. Go to black, fade to black. Next in the menu is our CRMX settings. So we can turn the CRMX on and off and also unpair. Next down is our Bluetooth settings. So you can turn your Bluetooth on, you can Bluetooth reset and Bluetooth UID, whatever that is. Now, you might want to turn off your Bluetooth when you're running your CRMX so you don't get any interference. All right, let's go back to the menu. We've got language, factory reset, product info, screensaver, and exit. All right, so let's have a look at the CRMX. Now, with my testing, I'm a corporate gaffer, so I'm only testing turn on and turn offs and like crossfade cues, things like that that I use. So I won't be getting into the multi-pixel stuff or anything like that. I've got no idea how to do that. If I did have the capability to do that and I did that on a corporate job, I reckon my clients would have a stroke. So, you know, pretty much basic operation. All right, so we'll have a talk about how it runs over CRMX. Now, there is one thing I don't like with the CRMX, and hopefully they can fix it up in a firmware update. And that is if you've got it set up in your CRMX, so it's talking to your transmitter, they're both linked. If you then set this up to work off the phone app, so you turn off the CRMX and turn on the Bluetooth, and then turn off the Bluetooth and go back to CRMX, you have to relink it. So what I normally do is I test the lights against a Titan tube to see how they're responding. Use this one as an indicator. Now, what I have found, and I'm not 100% certain on this because I'm not the smartest guy in the world, I suspect that this is using a different dimmer curve on its fade ups to on its fade downs, because I tried finding a matching dimmer curve with both tubes, and I couldn't find a dimmer curve that matched both tubes with fade ups and with the fade downs. So what I've done in the testing is I've just got both tubes running at their defaults. Now, the other thing I've done differently in the testing is I've exposed for the front of the lights, because I figure you're probably going to be using tube lights like these facing the camera. Let's start off with instant on-off commands. Now let's have a look at half-second automated fades. Now let's have a look at 1 second automated fades. Now let's have a look at 2.5 second automated fades. Now let's have a look at 5-second automated fades. Now let's have a look at CCT changeovers between 5600 Kelvin and 3200 Kelvin. Now let's take a look at half-second changeovers. Now let's take a look at 1-second changeovers. Now let's take a look at 2.5-second changeovers. Now let's take a look at 5-second automated changeovers. Now let's have a look at instant color change commands. Now let's take a look at a half-second crossover to a color hue. Now let's take a look at a 1-second crossover. Now let's take a look at a 2.5-second crossover. Now let's take a look at a 5-second automated crossover. And because the lights are quite out of step with each other, I'll be telling you when I'm sending the command. Sending the command now. Sending the command now. Sending the command now. Sending the command now. Okay, let's start going through all the data I've collected, starting off with brightness. All of the measurements were taken at a distance of 1 meter, and the meter was set to 800 ISO, 25 frames per second at a 50th of a second shutter. Now let's take a look at the average CCT accuracies. Now with this light, the higher the Kelvin you dial in, the more it is out by. Between 2000 and 3000 Kelvin, it is typically accurate to plus 12 Kelvin. Between 3100 Kelvin to 4000 Kelvin, it is typically accurate to plus or minus only 7 Kelvin. Between 4100 Kelvin to 5000 Kelvin, it is typically accurate to minus 61 Kelvin. And between 5100 Kelvin to 6000 Kelvin, it is out on average by minus 154 Kelvin. But I just want to point out there's quite a bit of difference between 5100 Kelvin and 6000 Kelvin. At 5100 Kelvin, it was out by minus 101, and by 6000 Kelvin it was over double that at minus 212. So the higher the CCT target value, the less accuracy there is with this light. Now let's take a look at our TM30 color render scores. Now between 2000 Kelvin and 2500 Kelvin, I don't want to give you an average because there is quite a bit of variation. So here are the individual results. Starting at 2000 Kelvin, it comes in with a score of 62. Then it goes to 71, 80, 90, 94, and then 95. Between 2600 and 3000 Kelvin, it averages 94.2. Between 3100 to 4400 Kelvin, it comes in at 93. And from 4500 Kelvin to 6000 Kelvin, it comes in at 94. Now let's take a look at our white point measured in delta UV. Between 2000 and 3000 Kelvin, it was out by plus or minus 0.0009 on average, which is very close to the Planckian curve. Between 3100 to 4000 Kelvin, it was out by plus 0.0018, which is under a 1/8 correction gel towards green. Between 4100 to 5000 Kelvin, it was tracking at an average of 0.0023, which puts it off the Planckian curve towards green by the equivalent of roughly a 1/8 correction gel. Now between 5100 and 6000 Kelvin, it was out on average by plus 0.0023. Now, if you're working to the Planckian curve, that would make the light green to roughly the equivalent of a 1/8 correction gel, but positions the light ever so close to the daylight curve, which is where our camera standards like D65 and D55 are located. All right, let's take a closer look at some of our kelvins now, starting with the lowest Kelvin we can dial in, which is 2000 Kelvin. When I dialed in 2000 Kelvin, I got 1993. The TM30 color vector scores were an average 62% color accuracy with an average 96% color saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and they're a bit of a mess. The spectrum is quite anorexic because we don't have an amber color emitter, but the white point is very accurate with a delta UV of minus 0.0004. When I dialed in 3200 Kelvin, I got 3201 with an SSI score of 84. The TM30 color vector results were 93% average color accuracy with an average 102% color saturation. Here are the CRI scores. R4, R9, R11 and R12 are all below 90. Here is the spectrum distribution. And the white point came in with a delta UV of plus 0.0016, which would make the light green to about 2/3 of a 1/8 correction gel. When I dialed in 4400 Kelvin, I got 4344. The TM30 color vector results were 93% average color accuracy with an average 103% color saturation. Here are the CRI scores. R9, R11 and R12 are all below 90. Here is the spectrum distribution. And the delta UV came in at plus 0.0024, which would make the light green to roughly the equivalent of a 1/8 correction gel. When I dialed in 5600 Kelvin, I got 5448. Now, if you want to get closer to 5600 Kelvin, I would suggest dialing in 5800. The SSI score came in at 73. The TM30 color vector results were 94% average color accuracy with an average 102% color saturation. Here are the CRI scores. R9, R11 and R12 are below 90. Here is the spectrum distribution. And the light came in with a delta UV of plus 0.0026, which would make the light green from the Planckian curve to roughly the equivalent of a 1/8 correction gel, but put the light almost on the daylight curve. When I dialed in 10,000 Kelvin, I got 8,885. The TM30 color vector results were 91% average color accuracy with an average 99% color saturation. With the CRI results, only R9 and R12 were below 90. Here is the spectrum distribution. And the white point had a delta UV of plus 0.0023. All right, now let's have a look at how accurately this light can dial in its color vectors. Red, which should be 0, came in at 2 degrees. Green, which should be 120 degrees, came in at 117 degrees. Blue was smack on at 240 degrees. Yellow, which should be 60, came in at 63 degrees. However, like with most RGB lights, I would suggest dialing in somewhere around 44 to get a decent looking yellow. Cyan, which should be 180 degrees, was very close at 179. And magenta, which should be 300, was also very respectable at 295. Right, that's another gear review done, and at $200 US, this is a bit of a no-brainer for me. This is instantly going to replace all of my other small tubes, which are about this size, because all my other small tubes run off phone apps, whereas this unit runs off CRMX. So look, phone apps are fantastic until they stop working, but I've found CRMX to be so dependable. And just this basic CCT HSI profile, you know, I can dial in my color temperature, I can crossfade in a color hue on top of that, and you know, even at a pinch, I can do some pulsing. So you know, just amazing capability. The only thing that concerns me is $200 US. Are lights getting a bit too cheap for their capability? All right, see you on the next episode of Gaffer and Gear.